Good morning, watercolor class. Today we are going to do a copy of a very famous work of art called The Great Wave off of Kanagawa by a Japanese artist named Hokusai. This is my version of his artwork, obviously not the real thing. And I want to tell you a little bit first about the artist who created it, because he's kind of got an interesting history. And then we will do an artwork together. So if you have oil pastels, I used oil pastels for the outlines of this. Otherwise, you can use just a pencil and do your painting, and then if you want those lines to look a little bit darker, you can outline it with a Sharpie. I think that's the method I'm going to use for my painting today. Okay, so a little bit about the artist Hokusai. He was born in Tokyo in the late 1700s. At that time, Tokyo was actually called Edo. So when you read about his art, they say it is from the Edo period in Japan. He made quite a few book illustrations and color prints. And when I say quite a few, I mean a lot, as many as 30,000. So he was a very prolific artist, and he really got famous for the wood block prints that he made. And in fact, the painting that we're going to be doing in watercolor today is actually originally a wood block print. And because these were cheaper and easier to reproduce, that is actually how a lot of Japanese art from this time period and in this style got to Europe. And a lot of artists who we've talked about before, including Van Gogh, who we talked about last week, they were inspired by the style that they saw coming from Japan. So, in fact, I'm pretty sure, I'd have to double check this to be positive, but I'm pretty sure I've read that Van Gogh was inspired by the artist Hokusai in some of his art making. So that's kind of a fun little connection from last week. Alright, so let's see, what else do I want to tell you about Hokusai? Oh, he was kind of a dramatic artist. He liked to get attention, and part of the way he did that was he made a picture that was so enormous that you could only see it from the rooftop. You'd have to go up to the rooftop and look down to really see the whole picture. And then after that, he created a picture of 2 sparrows on a single grain of rice. That is very tiny. So he liked to show kind of what he was capable of. Another interesting fact about him is that he liked to change his name a lot. So he actually was known by at least 40 different names in his lifetime. A Japanese artist was allowed to change his name or use a new name every time their social position or their style of work changed. So I suppose when he made giant art, he had one name, and when he was drawing little teeny art, he probably had another name. But we recognize him as Hokusai because that is the name he used in the art that he is most famous for today. Sadly, his house burned down and many of his drawings and notes were destroyed. But he said that from the time he was 6 years old, he had what he called a mania for drawing. He was obsessed with it. And when he was 73, he said he felt that he learned a little bit about art and nature, and he thought perhaps by the time he reached the age of 89, he would have made some progress, and then by the time he reached the age of 110, then he would be a good artist. That's what he said. Now, sadly, he did die at the age of 89, and he said around that time that if heaven would give him 10 more years, he would become a real painter. So he thought that he was not up to his potential even at the age of 89, and he wanted to work more and be better. The last name that he used on his paintings what it could be translated in English to mean an old man mad about art. So that is the artist Hokusai, and today we are going to draw his work, paint his work, The Great Wave, off of Kanagawa. And while I paint and tell you how to do it, I'm also going to talk about why it became a famous piece of art. Alright, let's get started. Our first step for this project, as is for most of our projects, is to draw our picture in pencil very lightly before we start painting. So we need to map out the wave because that is the primary focus of the whole picture. So I'm going to look at my picture and I'm noticing that the big large wave starts up here, kind of comes down and goes up again like that. So first I want to find out on my picture where the wave starts, which is about 1/3 of the way down your page. And I'm going to make a little mark right there. And then the farthest edge of the page, edge of the wave is a little bit more than halfway over. I'm looking at a printed copy of the wave while I do this. You can follow along with me and let me do kind of the work of it, or you can also look at your own printed copy or look online at a picture of it on the computer and do the same thing. But I'm just kind of, I'm mapping out, okay, that's about 1/3 of the way down the page, and this edge of the wave right here, that's what I'm mapping out, is a little bit more than halfway over. This lowest part of the curve comes down right about here on my page, and then it comes back up in a big curved U shape right there. So I'm going to draw this, and I want to draw this, the edge of this wave right here. There's a smaller wave coming up. And then of course the big wave up here. And then we can't forget Mount Fuji in the background. When I first saw this image, I actually thought that that was another peak of a wave, because Hokusai, being the awesome artist that he is, he almost kind of hid it in there because it's the same colors and kind of style as the peaks of the wave. So we could easily read that as a wave instead of a mountain, but that is actually Mount Fuji, way far away in the background. Mount Fuji, if you didn't know, is a very famous mountain in Japan. And when Hokusai made this woodcut print, it's actually one of 36 that go in a series, and they're called the 36 views of Mount Fuji. So every single one has Mount Fuji in it somewhere. And then some of them are like more mountain scenes, some have people in them, and some are more ocean scenes. So it's kind of interesting, and I encourage you to look up some of the other prints that go with this one. This one is by far the most famous, and in my opinion the most beautiful to look at as well. I just love how your eyes are led by the lines of the waves to kind of go like this and follow the wave up. See these darker alternating light blue, dark blue, light blue, dark blue stripes in the wave? That helps guide our eyes up the wave. And then these little finger-like sprays of the ocean foam, they kind of curve down. They almost look a little evil, don't they? And then when you notice, so that kind of brings your eye up, and those little fingers kind of curve down and make your direction of your eye come down. And we notice both Mount Fuji and these other shapes in here. There's some boats actually in this water. They're almost hidden because they follow the same curves of the wave, but you can tell that there's something else because they are different colors. Sorry, I had a kid issue that I had to deal with, but I am back now. So we are mapping out where our wave is, I'm looking at my image here and following the lines, trying to make my curves the same size and shape as the curves on Hokusai's original picture. Oh, and I think I was mentioning that there are 3 boats in the water here. 1, 2, 3. And when you notice those, I think there's an increased sense of danger in this picture. At first it seems like a beautiful picture of a wave, and then it starts to look a little bit perilous because this wave is about to crash down, and there are people in these little flimsy boats here, and they're gonna get splashed on quite a lot, I believe. It feels a little bit more scary when you look at it that way. Also, something that I read about this painting or woodblock print is that in Japan, people read from left to right instead of right to left. And so that, I mean, I'm sorry, other way around. We read from left to right, they read from right to left. And so when you look at this, they actually usually look at pictures the same way they read, where they start on this side and they move this way. I've got some stowaways in my class today. Their names are Addie and Luke. They're my kits, and they are going to be silent while they draw behind me while I do my recording. Right, guys? Yeah. Okay. So, I've got my main wave here, and then I want to do the mountain next. That's kind of at the bottom part of the wave, and it comes up like a triangle and comes down. I think Mount Fuji is a volcano. I don't know if it's an active volcano though. Alright, the next step we want to do is that second wave that's in front of the big wave. Guys. It's kind of coming up and then coming down in the same section as the big wave. It almost looks a little bit like the mountain. So it comes down. So I just drew this part right here. I'm going to draw the bottom part of the wave, so I'm mapping out where the white caps are. Yep, over there. Addie, help him get some paper, okay? You can draw on that. Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of making stripes to show where those dark and light blue lines are. That shows how the curve of the wave is. My first one that I made, I didn't do all the details of all those little tiny finger-like shapes that are coming off the white cap. You can decide how much of that you want to do. Alright, so I finished my drawing, and as you can see I made lots of those little finger-like white cap splashes, and then I made stripes that follow the curve of the wave all the way up. They even come back here behind that first big wave. Right here, and those. So make sure all of those have those stripes in it, because you're going to do dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue on all of those. So we are going to start painting. I'm actually going to do my background first. In Hokusai's painting, he has a very, very pale kind of cream color in the background, and then it fades into a purpley gray. But you can see that there's warm colors in the sky and cooler colors in the waves, but then the boats match the sky with some warm colors. So what I want you to do, I'm not going to do any boats on mine just to keep it a little bit more simple. So I'm going to do like a pale pinkish color in the background here for the sky. You can decide what your sky is. You could decide what your sky is going to be, but I want it to be a warm combination of warm colors so that it can contrast to the cool colors in our wave. And you can see that there's a lot of really nice balance in this artwork, because this shape here kind of mimics this shape. So if I turn this upside down, it would almost be like the sky is making a wave. So those shapes are very balanced, which is really good for an artwork. So try to make yours balanced as well. So to start my sky, I'm going to do wet on wet for the sky. Whoop. Brush had a little bit of purpley color on it. That might be helpful for you to see where I'm wetting anyway. So remember, wet on wet means that you wet the paper first and then you paint on it. I'm not wetting my whole sky because it will dry too fast otherwise. So I'm just going to wet this section right here. And then I'm going to create kind of a purpley pinky color for my bottom part of my sky. My husband's at work right now and the kids are with me, so we have to do what we can in quarantine. I put on a movie for them, but it seems like they'd rather be in here with me. little brush now so I can get in between those little finger shapes. You know me, I like sunset backgrounds for skies when I'm doing watercolor. So that's probably what this is going to turn out to be. I need a better brush though. Skies and wet on wet just work better with a round brush. I'm gonna do not wet on wet around these little finger things because it's easier to control the paint. If you did end up using oil pastel to trace the lines that you drew, that oil pastel will resist the paint, so that will help you with that. I'm just putting water on it now. when you start doing right underneath here, let me see if this helps a little bit. Underneath the little finger like waves, can you see that? We want to do just a really watered down super light blue underneath them because that gives it a little shadow. So if you look at Hokusai's, you'll see that that is what he did as well. He made little shadows underneath the finger-like wave things to show that some are above others and some are underneath. It gives it a little bit more depth, even though this is a pretty flat style of painting. There's still a little bit of depth there. Maybe I'll keep the light off. My bright light might be helpful for you guys to see. It kind of washes out my painting when it's shining on it. Right now my color blue is very tropical looking, not quite so ominous as Hokusai's wave. Looks a little bit more like a fun surfing wave. A darker blue, and I think I'm going to try, I keep on almost putting it in my coffee. Taking some of this very bright tropical blue and adding some purple to it. And even a little black. I don't usually like to add black to things. Need it a little bit darker. That's better. So now I'm going to do my stripes with this dark blue, and you might want to dry your paper again before you do this if you don't want it to blend. Hokusai's lines, they are very crisp, they don't really blend. Usually we're always trying to blend those colors into each other. But in this style, we want to keep them pretty separate. So mine is pretty dry. I don't mind if a little blends, but I'm not going to worry about drying it with the hairdryer. Alright class, so I finished up the last part of the painting, which is to trace over your pencil lines with a thin Sharpie marker or a thin pen. Let's see, can you see that? So that just gives it a little bit more definition. We can see those little finger-like wave parts of the white cap a little bit better, and everything is just a little bit crisper. And then the very last step is, Luke, the very last step is to sign our work, and I wanted to show you something about Hokusai's signature. So he wrote his name in Japanese up here on the side, and you can see instead of, generally artists who are from the Western culture generally write their name in the lower right hand side right here. Well, Japanese artists wrote their names up and down, and they usually put them over here. And you'll see a lot of different Japanese art that has many signatures on it, and I need to make sure that I'm correct about this, but I think that actually is the signatures of the people who've owned it. So like the original artist would sign it, and then if someone bought it, they would write their name. And so you can actually trace the origins of works of art through looking at the signatures on the front. So we're going to write our name like Hokusai did. We're going to put a box around it and write it up and down on the left side there. So make sure that your paint is all dry before you write your name. I'm going to write Mrs. Burger. Like that. And I'm going to put a rectangle around it, just like Hokusai did. There we go. So now we have our finished Hokusai painting based off of the Great Wave of Kanagawa. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Bye-bye.